Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this Telecom seminar, which is hosted by Technology Innovation Institute in Abu Dhabi. I'm Dr. Daniel da Costa, currently a principal researcher at the TII. And for today, we are pleased to welcome Professor Arsenia and Chorti from École Nationale Supérieure d'Électronique d'Application. Sorry for my pronunciation.
Fine.
In France. So she is a video speaker of this Telecom seminar. And the title of her talk is a roadmap for incorporating physical layer security in 6G, why it's needed and how we do it. So before we move it to the talk, let me introduce Professor Arsenia Chorti. So Professor Arsenia Chorti is with the École, as I mentioned, École Nationale Supérieure d'Électronique des Applications. She is joint head of the Information, Communication and Imaging Group of the ETIS Lab, UMR 1851, and a visiting scholar at Princeton and Access University. Her research spans in the areas of wireless communications and wireless system security for 5G and 6G, with a particular focus on physical layer security. And current research topics include context-aware security, multi-factor authentication protocols, 5G, 6G, and IoT, anomaly detection, and machine learning for communications, new multiple access techniques, and scheduling. She is a senior member of IEEE, a member of the IEEE INGR on security of the IEEE P 1951.1 standardization work group, Smart Cities, and member of the competitive power systematic and of the PhD thesis GDR ISIS award committee in France. And since October 2021, she's sharing the IEEE focus groups on physical layer security. So Professor Arsenia Chorti, thank you once again for accepting the invitation. It's a big pleasure for us to have you here. And now the floor is yours.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you very much for the very nice introduction. Thank you also for the very kind invitation and for giving me the platform to present my ideas on how we can incorporate physical layer security in 6G and basically why it is a good idea to do that. So today in this talk, I will start by the main question, what is the changes in 6G security protocols and why do we need new tools? And in this framework arises the need for context-aware security. And in that framework of context-aware security, we will see that physical layer security has a particular role to play. And I will give some examples of the outlined ideas for RF fingerprinting and secret key distillation, physical layer security protocols, and hardware layer anomaly detection. And then hopefully we will be able to have a discussion with the attendance of this talk. So I will go directly to the main question that is probably in the minds of many people attending today. Will physical layer security be part of 6G? And actually this question is just not about to make an impression. It's an actual question because incorporating security controls at the physical layer will come with let's say, risks that have to do with new implementations, and people are quite reluctant about that. And in the past, we have seen that very good technologies like elliptic curve cryptography actually suffered because of this reluctance, and people kept using RSA because this is what they understood best, and this is what they knew how to do best. So to change the protocols, especially in the security framework, and to take a big leap and say, okay, this time we will include the physical layer. To do that, there actually needs to be an inescapable need. There needs to be a need for that. It's not just because we're wishing for it. Okay, and then of course, there are other conditions that need to be met. There needs to be enough momentum. both from academia and industry. And of course, we need to have some good idea of how we're going to do it. Okay, so I will start with why, in my opinion, there is an actual need for this. And if we look at the 5G and beyond landscape, EMBB, for securing the EMBB, public key infrastructure was incorporated for the first time. It was a great enhancement. So earlier, let's say, weaknesses of 4G networks in terms of security were addressed, and this is fantastic news. But in 5G and beyond, we also have the introduction of new use cases, and most importantly, massive machine type communications and URLLC. And when it comes to this IoT type of, let's say, use cases, there are many issues that cannot be tackled with the standard security approaches. In particular, I will start from that of latency, because it's very easy to understand. So imagine we have very aggressive latency constraints in V2X networks, and still it takes about 20 milliseconds to verify a digital signature on a smart vehicle. And keep in mind that a smart vehicle is actually a high-end IoT device with a quite substantial chunk of processing power. Okay, so imagine how this translates to e-health and other types of applications for which there are very aggressive latency constraints. At the same time, when we look at massive IoT, scalability is an actual, is probably the most important issue there. So public key infrastructure for authentication and key distribution, is this a scalable solution when we talk about millions, billions, trillions of IoT devices? And is it actually worth the cost? Because deploying PKI comes at an enhanced cost. Is every little sensor going to be having a digital certificate? This is something that you pay to a private company. It's not a low-cost solution. At the same time, I mean, there has been a lot of investment and interest in quantum computing, and at this stage, it is an assumption, it is a working hypothesis we have to make that quantum computers might be possible to develop in the foreseeable future. NIST has released a related challenge for post-quantum cryptography. We're currently in the third phase, and we're expecting the 3 finalists. Maybe there will be a 4th phase. There's a Chinese challenge in parallel, and so on and so forth. The gist of it, and what is interesting to keep there, is that from the solutions we have seen up to now, this might change in the future, but from the solutions we have seen up to now, these come with a substantial cost to pay in terms of computational complexity, because the key sizes are substantial. And I'm talking about the post-quantum cryptographic algorithms that will replace asymmetric cryptographic algorithms, okay? And this is in direct, let's say, clash with the next point in my slide, where we will have to deploy a lot of constrained devices. And how will these devices be able to, let's say, take the cost of running computationally heavy post-quantum algorithms? Okay, so this is just a humoristic analogy for how the low-end IoT looks like from the perspective of security. Okay, so if we move down the road, then what actually we will see, and this is a new development in 6G, is the fusion of the digital and the physical worlds, the metaverse, the digital twins, and all those ideas. And since Greek proverbs were very much fashionable last year, I'm Greek myself, so I decided to describe, to give you a Greek proverb that I think is relevant in this direction, which is nous Ieee and soma Ieee, which means that a sound mind lives in a healthy body. So when we look at 6G true cyber physical systems, in other words, the fusion of the digital and the physical world, then we need new concepts to assess, let's say, the security of those systems, and these concepts cannot be hard concepts. So we cannot talk about security level 5 that is provided by AES 256. New concepts like trust have been coined. So we are now discussing trust and trustworthiness of 6G cyber-physical systems. What this Greek proverb, the point I was trying to make before was that in 6G, trust should also include the physical world. We can no longer just look at the digital, the cyber world, and close our eyes to the physical infrastructure on which this cyber world lies upon. So the moment we introduce soft concepts like trust, and we can define probably different trust levels, this should be mapped to corresponding security levels. So now we have a flexible, let's say, adaptive security framework that is dubbed as quality of security. In an essence, we can think of it as mirroring the differentiated services, quality of service paradigm. So we can provide different security levels that are mapped to different trust levels. And of course, to make this happen, what we need is to be able to build adaptive security controls. And also, we need to understand when and which of those adaptive security controls should be deployed and when. In other words, we need to have context awareness. So we need to have some situational awareness that will drive us into making the decision of which security protocol, which security control is pertinent for what application under what conditions. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of this. And my vision with respect to this context-aware security, which is not a new concept, so context awareness with application to security, it has been around as a concept for many, many years. But I think in 6G, there's an actual opportunity to see this type of concepts to become a reality. And the reason for that is not only the fact that there will be a lot of intelligence in the 6G network. Most people focus on the AI. But in my opinion, it is because there will be a lot of sensing in 6G. So if we look at ourselves, we are, let's say, aware, not only because we have brains, but because we are loaded with sensors. And this will be true for all sorts of devices in 6G. So from cameras to microphones to radar. So 6G devices will be able, let's say, to see behind doors, to detect heartbeat, to do things that probably will compromise and have to be examined from the privacy point of view. But apart from that aspect, there is a lot of opportunities there for gaining situational awareness. The thing is that if we take all of this sensing information, we need to deal with it, okay? And one way of doing it is to send everything back to the core network and hope that the core network will just do a good job and send us back, the answer about what is the context. Another option is that we will, and I hopefully, I think we will see this because it's an energy efficient solution. A lot of this processing that is necessary can happen closer to the device and closer to the edge. So all this big sensing data, we will need to somehow be able to compress them in a semantic way with respect to the goal at hand. So the goal at hand here is context-aware adaptive security. And by semantic compression, I mean, my first approach to it would be dimensionality reduction across all domains. That is possible because these are simple and straightforward techniques. We can also look at more advanced techniques, for example, the use of attention models and transformers and all sorts of more advanced neural network architectures. But this is something that is a necessary step in order to be able to identify out of the whole sensed data which parts are the ones that are pertinent, which part of the information is pertinent to making a decision with respect to the security situation. In this rough sketch, it's literally a rough sketch of how I see things. The next step in this ladder, next logical step, is to make some rough root cause analysis, so obtain somehow initial understanding of the causes of the observed events. So why did we see this change, for example, in this observed metric? Is it because something went wrong, or is it because a new node entered the network? And this type of analysis. And of course, then a global view of the network, both from the lower layers, but of course, fusing information from the higher layers as well in a semantic fusion stage. Here, probably we're looking at multimodal fusion type of machine learning and this type of approaches. All of this can allow us to obtain, in my opinion, context awareness, and this can drive adaptive security. And it is in this context of adaptive security controls that I see physical layer security playing an important role. And I will talk about that a lot. So this was like my description of why there is an actual need to change the tools and to change the approach in terms of securing the 6th generation wireless networks. In terms of momentum in academia and hopefully in industry as well, there is actually a big interest. So just in September 2021, we formed the IEEE Physical Layer Security Focus Group. We are more than 40 academic and industrial partners, including myself, Aline Jenner, Mathieu Bloch, Eman Hamad. We have 4 working subgroups led by Stefano Tomasin, Stefan Köpsel, Marco Baldi, and Younes Chorti. If you're interested in participating in any way to our activities, to our meetings, we are preparing a white paper at the moment. Please just email any member of the steering committee or any working subgroup leader. Okay, so this was the need and the momentum. So what are we talking about? What is physical layer security? So physical layer security, probably for many people in the audience, is the celebrated wiretap channel, wiretap coding. But in reality, it is a spectrum, it is an umbrella term that covers a spectrum of technologies that can pretty much address all of the main goals in security, confidentiality, integrity, authentication, and availability. For example, looking at availability, counter jamming at the physical layer basically means that we are able to stop, to prevent, to address denial of service attacks at the physical layer. And quite frankly, this is the only layer where we can deal with this type of attacks, with jamming attacks. When we look at authentication, there are technologies like localization-based authentication or RF fingerprinting-based authentication, where we can use location, the positioning, or the RF fingerprint of a node as probably a second authentication factor most of the times. Physical unclonable functions, that we can think of them as basically device fingerprints, unique fingerprints that can be used for device authentication. So their e-health or smart factory type of applications are very pertinent. Secret key generation from shared randomness. Here we can, let's say, exploit the reciprocity of the wireless channel between the coherence time, and we can extrapolate, we can distill secret keys from the environment for free, as I will show a few examples later on. Anomaly detection by monitoring the hardware and the physical layer. This is something new, and it is something that probably can ease, let's say, the strains that are put on controllers of SDN networks or in centralized type of detection. And of course, the wiretap channel coding, which I'm pretty sure most of you have heard of. All right, so this is all wonderful, but I still think we are in the wishful thinking type of let's say, stage. Okay, so we need to ask ourselves, at least the people in the community that are interested in this, we need to be honest and we need to ask the hard questions. So all this was just wonderful, all this description, but quite frankly, why is physical layer security not in 5G? Okay, and here we need to put our hand in our hearts, and we need to give some honest answers, because that's the only way we can see what are the weaknesses, and then hopefully we can come up with ideas on how to address them. So I think the first issue, in my opinion, of course, has to do with the fact that people just don't trust what we talk about, because they say, okay, you have a legitimate node Alice, you have a legitimate node Bob, there is an eavesdropper Eve. Why is there one eavesdropper? How many antennas has the eavesdropper? How do you know the channel of the eavesdropper? You don't know the channel, you work with outage probabilities. How do you know the statistics of the channel? All these are very, very serious and viable questions, and we need to be able to answer them. And the truth is that in 6G, I think we can actually answer them in a truthful and robust manner, because for the first time in 6G, we will see changes. For example, the channels, we now have a much better understanding. The channels can be controlled, and we have seen this. This has come up as a discussion item a lot in the IEEE Physical Layer Security Focus Group. For example, by narrow beam forming in millimeter and sub-terahertz, we can actually control, make the channel very, very directive. At the same time, a second aspect is that, and this, in my opinion, is fundamentally important, the channel can be learned in an online manner, and this is something that was not there as a possibility before in 5G. Okay, so online site-specific learning of the channel can actually disambiguate many aspects that have to do with how and when we can apply physical layer security. Okay, then we can also use advanced techniques, advanced signal processing techniques, for example, dimensionality reduction, to carve out a well-behaved channel that resembles the channel in the proof. And if we do that, then we can actually give very explicit security guarantees, and we can guarantee that what is suggested by the proof, that we can provide perfect secrecy, or that we can generate secret keys without leakage, this is actually happening. Overall speaking, context awareness is an enabler, as I tried to make the case before, of physical layer security, because it can allow us make a taxonomy of physical layer security technologies, and get a deep understanding of which technology should be applied under what conditions and with what parameters, let's say. Okay, so all of those things, I think, answer some of the fundamental criticism that we have seen in the past. Then a second issue has to do with the fact that only very recently, in 2019 actually, we got a clear understanding of the performance of physical layer security in the non-asymptotic regime, so in the finite or short block length. So in this very important paper by Young, Scheffer, and Poor, we have a characterization here of the achievable secrecy rate as a function of the block length, the error packet probability epsilon, and the information leakage delta. And this expression now, for the first time, allows us to be able to say things like, I can guarantee that for this transmission rate at this particular block length, let's say 1000 bits, at most 1 bit will be leaked to an adversary. And maybe such guarantees are good enough for a particular set of applications, or maybe another option is that they are good enough in terms of providing privacy for a lot of applications. Okay, and Here, this is from some recent work we have published in ITW 2021 with Mehdi Shahiba Herfjev and my colleague Laura Luzzi on how different types of codes, Reed-Muller codes versus polar codes, behave with reaching this asymptotic limit in a binary region channel. Of course, there needs to be a lot more work there and design of actual codes for more realistic channels. But this is a very first important step towards this direction. The fact that we have now this concrete understanding of what are the limitations. A third issue, and I have heard this a lot from wireless engineers, and it's normal, has to do with the fact that physical layer security, no matter how you look at it, compromises the transmission rates. And this is only normal because you cannot provide reliability and on top of that security guarantees and not lose something. And what you sacrifice here in terms of when it comes to physical layer security is clearly you sacrifice rate. Okay, so and this is very important criticism, because in 6G we don't want to reduce the rates, we want to increase the rates, and this is a very important target. So I think here, at least this is my proposal, and I'm putting this out for discussion. This is my own idea here. We need to make a choice. Are we going to opt for physical layer security as a standalone technology, or are we looking for hybrid systems where physical layer security can be combined with classic crypto, for example, symmetric block ciphers in this context? And personally, I opt for the second answer, for the second solution. So what I think is the most promising way to implement, at least in the first phase, until we have a better understanding, a deeper understanding of how to do things, to deploy physical layer security in order to authenticate users through RF fingerprinting, physical implorable functions, or other techniques, and also to distill with SKG or distribute with query-type coding the keys that are necessary to be used for symmetric block ciphers and cryptographic suites like the ones used, for example, in the record protocol of TLS version 1.3. So if we take this as an example, and we try to replace the asymmetric, the handshake, the TLS handshake, which uses RSA, if we try to replace that with, let's say, some localization-based authentication or path-based authentication, and we generate and distribute keys using, for example, secret key generation, then, and we look at what are the necessary key rates, okay? So then we will see that basically a target rate that we should be looking at is very small, of the order of 0.006 bits per second. And on top of that, this is just for one record. The keys, these keys in cryptography are reused many times over again. So in reality, the rate is not the issue, okay? So I think we should forget about this anxiety for reaching, for increasing the rate of physical layer security, and we should focus on providing very strong security guarantees for the proposed technology. It's about quality and not quantity. I think this is important. At least this is my take on this. So wrapping this part together, physical layer security has a role to play in this context of quality of security and context-aware security, because it is inherently adaptive. So it's very easy to create adaptive security controls using physical layer security. You just need to adapt the transmission rate, and you have adapted the outage probability immediately. Okay, so looking at, again, at this concept here, this target rate tau, it can be imposed, it can be derived from the rate that is necessary for key distribution. for example, the secrecy outage probability can be selected to be mapped to a quality of security level. We have the finite block length analysis that now allows us to understand if there are leakages and what is the implications of that. And very, very importantly, we have this online learning of the channel that for the first time allows us not to rely on 3GPP models or models that were developed for reliability and we're not sure they're good enough for security, but actually to rely on what is actually happening real time in the environment. Okay, and I would like to give some examples here of some works that touch upon different aspects of what I talked about. So the first example is about how we can use dimensionality reduction as a preprocessing tool for authentication and key distillation. So this work was derived with 3 postdoctoral students that worked with me last year. Morales Renivisan, he's currently in Chalmers. Sotiris Kaperes, he's still with me at ENSEA, and Mehdi Shakiba Herhef, he's now in Huawei. And in this work, we started from the observation that if we look at the channel state information at the wireless fading coefficients, what we're basically observing is a composite process. It's a complex process. On one hand, we have large-scale fading effects that are largely predictable and they are useful for authentication. And what is important there is the separability between those components in order to be able to distinguish between different users at different locations. And on the other hand, we have small-scale fading processes due to unpredictable variations in the channel state information. And this can actually be treated as a source of entropy and can be useful to distill secret keys from shared randomness during the coherence time of the channel. And here, unpredictability is very, very important because the unpredictability of these processes is what will guarantee to us that we are able to extrapolate secret keys that are not observable at an adversary that is near us. Okay, and this was exactly the sort of experiment we set up with some data that were very kindly given to us by Nokia in Germany. So this data were collected in the Nokia campus in Stuttgart. So there is a massive MIMO base station that we refer to as Bob here, 64 area antenna, 50 FPM subcarriers at 2.18 gigahertz. And then we have Alice on this card. Alice moves along one of those tracks, and we have assumed that Eve moves parallel to Alice at a distance in a parallel track at a distance of 1 meter to her. So Alice is performing what we call an on-the-shoulder attack. So Alice is really located next to, Eve is really located next to Alice. Okay, and trying to capitalize on the previous idea that I can use large-scale fading for authentication and small-scale fading for keys, we performed here a power domain decomposition, and we use the conjecture that large-scale fading is dominant in power and therefore is captured in the first few principal components if we performed an eigenvector decomposition of the CSI matrix observed at Bob. So this was our conjecture. So the conjecture here is that the first D hat principal components capture the elements, the components that are useful for authentication. And then we looked for a range of principal components from D1 tilde to D2 tilde that captures well the shared randomness. In other words, in this range of principal of eigenvectors, to put it simply, we still have reciprocity between Alice and Bob, but we gain independence. So these observations are unobservable by Eve, by the attacker that is 1 meter away. Okay, so this translated into some mathematical criteria, into some metrics that we set up. So we have chosen the separability of the metrics to express the separability of the metrics through the total variation distance between the RF fingerprints. And we looked for the D hat maximizes the TVD basically. And with respect to D1 tilde, D2 tilde, we looked at the compromise between lowering the correlation and the dependence between the observation of Alice and Eve and retaining the reciprocity between Alice and Bob. Okay, so the gist of it is that for this given data set, the end result was that just keeping the first principal component actually allows to maximize the separability of the fingerprints. And this is very dramatically shown here in the depiction, where we have the original time series, and this is the time series that correspond to the first principal components. With respect to the small scale fading, what we have found is that if we keep the principal components in the range with indices between 6 and 30, then we were able to collapse essentially the cross correlation coefficient from a value of 0.38 to 0.14, and this has also been tested with respect to an independence test that we ran, and the same results were confirmed. At the same time, for this range of principal components, we did not compromise a lot, at least, the reciprocity of the observations between Alice and Bob. Okay, so here is the value of the independence test criterion. Okay, so this is just to show how dimensionality reduction can help us separate and disentangle things. So in this first example, how to disentangle what is useful for authentication from what is useful for secret key. So in this second part, this second example, I will just present how such ideas can be used in hybrid physical air security crypto systems. So this is a depiction of the standard secret key generation approach. So we exchange pilots. Then one of the two nodes, Alice in this case, transmits some side information to Bob, and Bob is then able to use this side information to basically reconcile his dithered observation RB to Alice's observation RA, okay, through the use of a Slepian-Wolf decoder. And there's a final privacy amplification step. So the pre-processing I described before has to do with this first phase here, where the pilots are exchanged. Okay, so what happens at this stage here when we transmit the side information? So this is actually a transmission in the clear, and there is no guarantee here that an attacker might not come and just tamper with what we have transmitted. So what we proposed here was to extend this simple schematic diagram about how to perform the standard basic secret key generation and incorporate it inside an authenticated encryption scheme. So with the difference was very minute. So basically Alice unilaterally completes the secret key generation here, K. If you look carefully in this diagram, Alice does not need to talk to Bob to derive the key. Alice can do it unilaterally on her own. So here we just changed the timing, the sequencing of the events just ever slightly. And she uses this key to perform authenticated encryption. In other words, to produce a ciphertext and to produce a message, a tag that actually guarantees the integrity of the ciphertext. And we also concatenated there, pre-appended, if you want, this side information that is necessary to Bob for extrapolating the same secret key. And by doing that, this tag here, it can be proven that this tag here now not only guarantees the integrity of the ciphertext, but also guarantees the integrity of the site information in one go. So this is just a very simple example of how it is not at all difficult, complicated to combine physical layer security schemes with classic crypto. This can be done, okay? Then we performed pretty much the same idea I talked about before, extrapolating the fingerprints, but here we actually did it in the time domain by accounting for the fact that large-scale fading components are slow varying processes as opposed to small-scale fading. So here we just used a Kalman filter to extrapolate basically what we did before with the first components of the PCA, and the Kalman filter in essence acted as a low-pass filter, a smoothing operator. And we put everything together in an actual protocol in which we used physical and clonable functions as a primary authentication factor. We used proximity estimation as a secondary soft authentication factor. We used secret key generation with the extension I presented before to generate keys that were used in a zero round trip time protocol. And everything together was formally proven using the Tamarin proven, biologic, MB logic, and so on and so forth. This is just to show that whatever is possible and whatever we are used to be doing with standard crypto, we can actually provide the same formal proofs when we build protocols using physical layer security schemes. Okay, and just the final part of this talk, and I hope I didn't speak for too long. So here, the last thing I wanted to show you, because I find this very interesting, is some work on anomaly detection for software-defined network wireless sensor networks. Here, this work was delivered with my ex-PhD student, Gustavo Nunes, and his co-supervisor, Cynthia Marghi at the University of Sao Paulo. And here we looked at large networks of very simple devices. Okay, so the devices we looked at were actually these very tiny sensor nodes, all right, that measure temperature, humidity, and certain other things. And the behavior of these devices is, let's say, follows a clock. Okay, so it's quite regular. All right, so it is actually very easy to develop anomaly detection techniques by using change point theory. In other words, by monitoring a short window, here as short as 200 samples, monitoring chunks of time series of an observable event, and seeing if there is any major difference, any major change in the mean or the variance of the observable metric. And the metric, and we can do that using the standard change point theory techniques. So in terms of what we are monitoring, the standard approach is to look at network layer metrics, for example, the number of control packets exchanged or the number of data packets that were delivered and so on and so forth. Okay, and we did this and it worked perfectly nice. But then it occurred to us that maybe it is possible, because those techniques are very, very lightweight, the change point approaches that I'm talking about, maybe it is possible for every node to do some sort of self-monitoring by looking at their own proper metrics. And maybe each one of those nodes can monitor, let's say, either the processing time, the memory usage, the transmitting time, the control packets rate or the control packets received rate, or some metric that has to do with the behavior of the hardware. And what we took note, we actually did this emulation And we looked at the percentage of nodes that were able to detect an attack when it was launched with a probability, with high probability between 75 and 100%, okay, with a bit lower probability between half and 75%, with a low probability of 0.5 to 0.5%, or with a very low probability lower than 25%. And we did that for a couple of attacks that we set up. So here we're measuring what is the percentage of nodes that performs actually detection of the attack with low, medium, high probability, and so on and so forth. And quite regrettably, what we have seen there is that in reality, most of the nodes did not actually detect anything. So most of the time, the percentage of nodes that detected the attack were minority. And this was quite disheartening as a result, until we looked a little bit closer to the topology of the network, and we realized that actually the nodes that were raising the alerts, the nodes that were detecting the attacks, those few nodes, they were the nodes around the attackers, in the neighborhood of the attackers, okay? And nodes further apart from the source of the attack were ignorant of the attack. So the impact of the attack did not propagate uniformly across the network. And this was very interesting as a conclusion, because it allowed us to pinpoint potential positions for the attackers. So to pinpoint which are potentially the malicious nodes. And this is, to me at least, a very important step in terms of obtaining some understanding of a root cause analysis, even in this very simple scenario. I mean, where we have just a wireless sensor SDN network. Okay, so here are some related papers. There are some newer ones in archive. Please feel free to contact me if you want more information. And just to recap, physical air security is currently a hot topic, and there is a lot of potential there. There are many reasons. There are many things that work for in our advantage. So first of all, the propagation conditions can be learned in real time now. The propagation conditions can be controlled. So we have situations like millimeter wave and sub-terahertz that make BiTAP coding a viable scenario. Localization, no matter how we look at it, it's a default service in beyond 5G, and it's a soft authentication factor for free. SKG is now a mature and low-cost alternative to key distribution. The industry has embraced paths and biometrics. There are directions like quality of security, trust, openness, flexibility in the design, virtualization, softwareization, and all of those things that make things easier for us. And sensing in general allows us to deploy physical air security in the context awareness scenario. So thank you very much for your attention, and I would be very glad to take questions if there are any.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much, Arsenia. Actually, it was a very informative presentation. Actually, this is a research topic which has been investigated for some years. And actually, you replied my first question, that why is not in 5G. So this would be my first question, but you reply very well.
I'm sure there are more reasons. I just tried to highlight some of them.
Yes. So now we'll move to the QA section. So feel free to write your question in the chat box, okay? Or if you prefer, raise your hand and make the question by yourself. We have
yeah, go on. Yeah.
Okay, I will. I have some questions, but I actually some clarifications just to make it more interactive at the discussions. But I have some questions from the audience. Let me read here. the first question is about the use of quantum key distribution for physical security in 6G. What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there has been this announcement that it has already happened in experiment. I mean, there have been demonstrations, or at least alleged demonstrations, for satellite communications. So it is possible, but it is not necessarily a low-cost solution, especially because one issue there has to do with the type of coding, error correction coding, and this is still an open issue there. I mean, we're not 100% to the point, I think, but definitely this is fantastic for optical links, either in black fibers or in satellite links. Definitely, quantum key distribution is. I don't see this for the low end IoT, no, of course not, but definitely there are applications where this is a good idea.
Okay, another question is, could you please comment on the RF impairments and clock difference for key generation?
Right. Okay. Right. I haven't studied this, but Eunice, thank you. This is an excellent question. So the capability between transmitter and receiver, it will impact, of course, the rates at which we can generate secret keys, and definitely this imbalance needs to be taken into account. We haven't looked into this into extensive detail, but it's a very interesting topic. I mean, it should and it will be investigated as soon as we start deploying actual, let's say, demonstrators of those systems. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I have a general question. Actually, when it started, I mean, many people started investigating physical security in the past. It's basically to complement, and the main motivation was to explore security in the physical level and to complement cryptography, for example. And I mean, to complement some of the core security functions. And I agree with your vision about these hybrid schemes, right, that you presented, and especially when you talk about the quality of security. And you show this is the key performance metric, right, to identify how to make it adaptive, I mean, security level, I mean, in terms of implementation. So my question is how to identify the right quality of security and metric, and how to combine these metrics with crypto schemes. I mean, how to make it incorporating properly in the security protocols. So could you please tell us?
That's not a very simple question. I could give a second talk probably around this question.
Yeah.
So I think nobody knows right now, to be honest. My first ideas would be that we need to take a view. We need to understand what is the threat level, how much the attacker is invested in breaking the system. Who is the attacker, in other words? Okay. What is the value of information we are exchanging? Is it pictures of cat and dogs? Are we going to put there all our efforts, or put all our efforts into securing the information that really has to be secured? So if we are really looking at adaptive security protocols and defining the security level that is appropriate for a given application, this is a very complicated, very complex question. And we need to look at many parameters at once. So we have to look at ourselves. We have to understand how valuable is this information for ourselves.
Yes.
I mean, but we also need to look at the attacker. Who is the attacker, and what are they prepared to do. In that sense, one thing that is new with physical layer security, I wouldn't say it is good or bad, but it definitely is different with respect to classic cryptography, is the fact that there needs to be some sort of physical presence for the attacker. So the attacker needs to at least have placed a device or something in the environment. It cannot happen from an arbitrary distance, okay? So this is something new. Sorry, what was the second part of your question?
No, actually, I'm just, try to make some clarifications. For me, it's still unclear how to combine, to identify the right combination between, physical security and crypto schemes, and make it work in the security protocols.
Yeah, I think we need a taxonomy there, and taxonomy of adaptive security controls that would include adaptive physical layer security controls. And by taxonomy, what I mean is that we need to make a big map of, let's say, the use cases, the verticals, and also what are the technologies available for each use case, what are their limitations, what are in terms of complexity, of energy consumption, of latency. And I think this is how you can start then pinpointing when to use what and how. So just to give a simple example, if we are looking at wireless sensor networks and we don't need a lot of rate, okay, because they're just transmitting humidity measurements, maybe wiretap coding is good enough with some security guarantees like the ones I referred to, like in 1 kilobyte of data, I'm looking at most 1 bit. That might be okay. But then if you're looking at a smart factory or e-health applications where probably the security guarantees need to be more stringent, then maybe it is there where you should probably combine physical layer security with symmetric cryptography.
Okay. Yes, actually, it's not an easy question. Actually, it requires a more in-depth investigation, but it's very interesting. It's a very interesting research direction. So we have another question. Question is, to realize physical layer security, we actually require physical attribute accessibilities, which might not be available in today's commercial networks, especially in cellular networks. So please let us know your vision on this, and will the future standards take this fact in account to provide more access?
Well, I think that what I tried to make the case for was that in this cognitive network era, intelligent network, or network as a sensor, or all those ideas that we have heard about, there is room. These are the enabling technologies for physical layer security. So physical layer security will not, let's say, will leverage this type of advances. They are not present today, but they are promised, let's say, for 6G. So intelligence and a lot of sensing combined can provide the necessary, let's say, tools for understanding the environment to the level where we can actually deploy physical layer security with some pretty good understanding of what are the limitations and what we are achieving. I don't know if I understood correctly.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, the question was about cellular networks. So maybe cellular networks is not the first application, or to put it differently, maybe we'll just see elements of physical layer security in cellular networks that have to do with localization and positioning. So this type of things. I mean, in terms of measuring trust and trustworthiness of the node based on their location and stuff like that. For the cellular network, I think because the delays are not very aggressive, the computational power, I mean, usually, okay, there is quite enough power. I mean, it's not the phones. I mean, they are quite big devices. So, I mean, many of the constraints, the problems I described before are not necessarily there for cellular networks. So maybe this is not the first, let's say, use case that I see for physical layer security. It's more the IoT, especially with respect to the very constrained scenarios in terms of connectivity, of energy, latencies, and so on.
Okay. Another question is, how about the impact of convert channel in your study? Have you studied this topic?
Okay. So yeah, I didn't mention covertness, of course. Yes, it's a well-established information theoretic approach. I should include it in my slides. There is a very fundamental information theoretic result for convert communication. It has been proven that about square root of n bits can be covertly transmitted in a chunk of n bits, roughly speaking. So basically, you can transmit maybe even without being perceived that you're transmitting anything. So this is about covertness. At the moment, as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong, we have not yet identified the encoder that will allow to do us, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I didn't follow some recent advances there. And B, I do not have any use case application scenario apart from military right now. But definitely, I mean, covertness is definitely part of physical layer security. I should have included it.
Okay. Another question is, when you talk about conducting the node detect experiment, and you mentioned how you detected the attackers around it. Can you emphasize on that?
Right. Okay. So basically, this was the network, 100 nodes, and there were quite a few attackers. If you look here in this histogram, you're going to see that most of the nodes, they do not detect the attack. So this is the percentage of nodes that detects the attack by monitoring different metrics. And the case is worse in this second type of attack. The attacks, I mean, they don't matter. They can be some form of attacks. So what we have found was that it was the nodes in the vicinity, it was really the neighboring nodes that were the ones raising the alert. And for example, this node was not raising any alert, but this node, because it is in the immediate vicinity, was raising an alert. So the impact of the attack was not the same across the whole network, and this was interesting. I mean, I think this deserves a little bit more attention. I mean, this is still a first work there, so hopefully.
Okay, another question is, could you please elaborate more on the relation and difference of security and privacy? How would physical security address privacy issues in SecG?
Right. Okay, another very easy question. Thanks, Diana. Right. Okay. So I think, as I mentioned before, with all of the sensing that will go on, there are actually very serious issues in terms of privacy. So what I was saying is that definitely with all the sensing, privacy is a major concern, and all the tracking and localization. We know the positioning of nodes and so on and so forth. There are some signal processing or machine learning things that we can do there. For example, we can use kind of channel charting techniques in order to distort the actual positioning of nodes, so generate charts instead of providing the actual positions on actual maps. So we can do things like that, or we can go brave okay, and say that short finite block length write-up coding is good for privacy. I know that many people will be shocked about that, because that's not how we look at privacy. This is not what we're used when we discuss privacy. But if you think about it, the cornerstone of privacy is distortion. So as long as we can say, you can definitely not obtain most of the information I'm transmitting, maybe you can obtain just a few bits. That's pretty good privacy as far as I'm concerned. I mean, maybe we can start thinking a little bit outside of the box. Okay, so privacy of the information, maybe we can use this type of approaches. Privacy of localization, maybe we can use representations in different domains rather than the actual two-dimensional map or 3D map that we might have by using unsupervised learning like channel charting. So
Yes.
Of course, there are other aspects in privacy that I haven't touched at all. So it's a huge topic.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah, I have a general comment. Actually, you presented many interesting ideas about this new vision. Okay, this hybrid schemes, and you present a roadmap and how to address the security challenges in the future. But I think that there is still some parts, I mean, that need to be connected. I mean, to be embedded in a more holistic approach, right? So how about the standardization aspect? So what are your thoughts? Because we are planning for 6G, right? But we started to work on physical security before 5G, and it was not adopted because you presented very clearly the reasons. And how about for 6G? What are your thoughts on in terms of standardization?
Yeah, as you mentioned, of course, this talk, this seminar is only very partially covering the topic, and this is only normal. It's not a one-man show or a one-woman show. Create a roadmap. Okay, so these are just a few ideas. I mean, my ideas. Hopefully, other people in the community, they will complement, they will correct some elements, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to standardization, I think we're doing quite a lot of work in this focus group. We're actually on our 7th, 8th meeting now. We are preparing a white paper, and the main idea there was that we would like to create a standardization, IEEE standardization working group down the road, max in 2 years from now. We have trying to be in contact with the ITU through WWRF and Nigel Jeffries. We are trying to expand. I mean, we hope also somehow to be able to talk to 3GPP. I mean, we are interested. This is exactly what we are trying to do here. And any help in this direction by people like and institutions like TII, please, I mean, we're very, very interested, and we would be very glad to
and hope, yes, definitely.
And as I said, I think it is very important that we take this seriously, because physical air security can actually provide answers, and I think we need to stress this. It can be a cost-effective solution. It can open new markets and new interests for the telecom companies. And most importantly, it can provide, let's say, different type of security that were not used before. So we can generate keys that are not controlled by anyone, for example.
Yes.
Or the guarantees can be explicit. And this, again, is
you have a more controllable channel, right?
Yes.
And, you can explore this. And I fully agree with you.
Yeah, many people in the focus group actually, especially Lynn Jenner, put a lot of, and Stefano Tomasin and others, they put a lot of stress on that point. Not that now we understand much better how the channel can be controlled. So one idea is very narrow beamforming. Other people, they support intelligent reflective surfaces. Other people talk about wireless multi-hop, whatever. The thing is, we now have a much more mature understanding of how to do channel engineering, basically. So
definitely. Yes, so let me see if you have more questions from the audience. I think you don't have more questions. So, okay, maybe I'm going to conclude, the seminar. I would like to thank once again Arsenia for this very nice talk. Actually, hopefully it can inspire new papers in the area. It can attract more people to this very interesting research topic. Okay, and thank you very much for your time and for delivering this talk. It was recorded, so we are recording all the seminars and they will make available in our YouTube channel, TII YouTube channel very soon. Okay, so that people can watch again and see and disseminate your talk in our community. Okay.
Thank you very much for the invitation and for giving us the floor for presenting those ideas.
Thank you. And thank you all the attendees for joining us in this seminar. And the next seminar, Telecom seminar, will be held in 2 weeks. Okay, I will announce it through some mailing lists. So please keep an eye on this schedule. Thank you very much.